When you think of South Korea, you probably think of a global tech giant, right? An economic powerhouse. So, why is the same country so tragically vulnerable to landslides? The human cost is just shockingly high. In this explainer, we're going to dig in and uncover the hidden reasons behind this really deadly paradox. Okay, let's just start with a number that really sets the stage. Get this, 8.5. That's the average number of people killed or injured in every single landslide event in South Korea. I mean, that's not just a statistic, right? It's a measure of human tragedy that feels completely out of place for a nation that's so advanced. And this right here, this really gets to the heart of the puzzle. You've got this global powerhouse on one side, top 15 economy, leader in tech, you name it. But then on the other side, when it comes to landslides, it's a deadly outlier among developed nations. It just doesn't add up. So what is going on behind the scenes? All right, to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to start with the land itself. Let's take a look at the natural risk factors that make the Korean peninsula, quite literally, a land of falling mountains. So the first big piece of the puzzle? It's the geography. A staggering 70% of South Korea is mountainous. Just think about that. That creates a natural and really dangerous stage for landslides, where the very ground the country is built on is steep and, well, prone to just giving way. Okay, so now you take that super steep terrain and you add some extreme weather into the mix. South Korea has this intense monsoon climate. We're talking about getting hammered with over 1,200 millimeters of rain every year and facing, on average, 3 typhoons. All that water in a short amount of time, that's the main trigger that turns a stable slope into a deadly slide. And then what's going on underneath all that is where it gets really bad. The geology basically creates a perfect storm. The bedrock is this weathered granite that's just full of cracks. And on top of that, you have this thin, unstable layer of soil. Then in the winter, water gets into those cracks, it freezes, it expands, and it literally wedges the rock apart. So by the time the heavy summer rains come along, the whole system is just primed for catastrophic collapse. Okay, so with all these natural risks piled up, you'd expect an absolutely world-class response system to deal with it, right? I mean, it makes sense. And here's the thing. On paper, South Korea has exactly that. So let's take a look at the official framework that's supposed to be keeping people safe. The country has been building its legal defenses against this stuff for decades. It started way back in 1995 with the Natural Disaster Countermeasures Act, and it's been updated and improved since then, in 2004 and 2008. So they've created this really comprehensive legal framework specifically to manage these kinds of disasters. Like I said, on paper, the laws are all there. And it's not just about laws either. There's a whole multi-agency system in place. You've got the Ministry of Safety leading the charge on prevention policy. The Korea Forest Service is monitoring the mountain hazards and issuing warnings. The Weather Service is providing the rainfall forecasts. And then the local authorities are the ones responsible for inspections and safety measures on the ground. I mean, on the surface, it looks incredibly thorough. But here's our first big clue that something is really wrong. Research actually points out that the official response seems to be, and I'm quoting here, somewhat out of step with the range of global norms, and that a more rigorous approach is needed. So even with all these laws and all these agencies, the system just isn't delivering the safety it promises. The big question is, why? And this is where we really start to find the answer to that why. We're about to pull back the curtain and uncover the hidden flaws, these critical, systemic gaps that explain exactly why a high-tech nation is failing to protect its own people from falling mountains. Okay, so here's the first huge problem. It's a massive blind spot in the research. For years, scientists have done an incredible job studying that thin layer of soil on the slopes. They know its shear strength, how water moves through it, all that stuff. But they've almost completely ignored the bedrock itself, which makes up, most of the terrain. They're not using standard global tools like what's called a rock mass rating, which is basically a stability score for the rock, to understand the very foundation of their mountains. So this intense focus on just soil and rain, it leads to a really crucial question that the system just isn't asking. And that question is, what about earthquakes? Despite some recent seismic activity in the region, the potential for an earthquake to weaken a slope or even trigger a landslide is almost entirely ignored in their research and hazard assessments. That's a huge and frankly, a potentially catastrophic oversight. All right, the next major flaw isn't about geology, it's about data. And researchers have this really powerful metaphor to describe the problem. They call it islands of automation. And what that means is that all these critical data systems, for construction, for infrastructure, they're all operating in total isolation from one another. So getting a single unified picture of the risk, it's basically impossible.
And this breaks down exactly what those islands are. Just look at this. You've got one system for architectural design, another for engineering, a third for the actual construction, and then a totally separate one for infrastructure like slopes, roads, and tunnels. Think about what that means. The people designing a brand new apartment building might have absolutely no idea that the slope right behind it is considered a high-risk zone. The data just isn't talking to each other.
So you start to see the picture, right? The whole system is just full of cracks. Their warning models are based on rainfall data from the past, not on what climate change might do in the future. They treat landslides and debris flows as totally separate problems instead of the cascading failures they often are. And, like we just saw, all this key data is locked away in different government silos. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time identifying the problems. Now, for the most important part, how do we fix it? Let's talk about the path forward to closing this deadly gap between the plan and the reality. And this table, wow, this really puts the problem into perspective. You've got South Korea, a top 15 global economy, a really densely populated country, and the annual budget for steep slope safety is only about $139 million. That's just 0.008% of its GDP. It's tiny. There's just a massive misalignment between the very high level of risk and the resources they're putting into managing it. And let's be clear, the cost of this gap is measured in human lives. The source material we're looking at puts it so powerfully, saying human resources represent the most valuable and irreplaceable national asset. This isn't just some abstract engineering problem. It's about protecting a nation's most precious resource, its people. So what's the game plan? Well, here are the key strategic priorities. First, they've got to use modern tech like drones and LiDAR to create super detailed 3D maps and, finally, start analyzing the stability of the rock itself. Second, they need to build way smarter warning systems, ones that use AI and real-time sensors to send instant alerts directly to people's phones. And third, they have to break down those data islands by creating a single, unified digital platform where all this risk information can be seen by everyone who needs it all at once. Ultimately, what it all comes down to is a balanced, research-driven approach. It's not just one thing. It's about getting much better data, building much smarter alert systems, and then integrating everything so that finally, all the different pieces of this dangerous puzzle can be seen together at the same time. And that really leaves us with this final, massive question. I mean, we live in an age of big data, artificial intelligence, and just incredible technology. So the question for South Korea, and really for all of us, is this. Can we finally use all these amazing tools to predict the breaking point of a mountain before it's too late?